higher education experience is vital. And that it is who has access to those extracurricular activities is located within people's class, race, in terms of social divisions. And for me, it's almost as if those students who come from white middle class backgrounds, as if they belonged and they understood the rules of the game. And here I'm using Pierre Bourdieu, who I think is a very useful sociologist in terms of this. He did a study of French higher education. It's only recently the extent of the study being done, repeated in the UK, and it clearly is the same from the work that's been done by Tony Bennett and others. These students, I love this term, are like a fish in water. So it's effortless for them. It is just natural. It's no more natural than flying to the moon is natural, actually. But they have been so schooled and so socialized that they know exactly what the rules of the game are. And they can just effortlessly swim through the water. Whereas for others, they're not fish, they're bears. And it's much more difficult for them. And they work incredibly hard. But actually, they're carrying with them certain things which the academy does not recognize, but more importantly, the world outside does not recognize. So if I've depressed you enormously, hopefully we can move forward in terms of things that we can do. I actually think as teachers we have a huge responsibility to try to look at how we can alleviate some of these matters. If we care about actually education as a radical project, not as a conservative project, it seems to me that we are the people who are the stormtroopers into a more radical world. Crucially, some educationists have argued that we have to regard our classroom as a closed, sealed environment in which the students operate there. We don't pay attention to the cultural and social differences. This is an argument I have with my academics in my university fairly regularly. They say, oh, but we'll have prejudices. No, I reply, you won't have prejudices if you just understand some of the contexts in which they are working. I think secondly, it's really important that we understand what students do beyond our classrooms. Now I know with some of the massification that we're dealing with, where some classrooms are thousands of students, it's really difficult and challenging to have some kind of sense of that. But there are ways and means of finding out what people are doing beyond class. Why is this important? Well, I was talking to a colleague yesterday who said to me that he had gone back to do some studying, and he actually understood for the first time what his students were experiencing, because he suddenly found that he might have got a phone call just before he had to go to class which said that his child was ill or whatever. He'd then have to go into the class and carry on as if everything was normal. His ability to study at that point was not the same as it would have been if he'd not had that phone call. So actually understanding what's going on for your students means that you will be able to help them in the classroom better. I think it's also important, because some students are like fish in water and understand the roles and the rules of higher education, and some don't, it's important to critique our actual environment within classrooms. Some subjects, that's much easier to do. In my discipline, sociology, it's terribly easy to do. It's terribly easy to do in literature. It's terribly easy to do in art. And maybe that's why our government is not going to fund any of those subjects any longer. Having said that, as Sue said earlier, it is perfectly possible to do that within the sciences as well. So I think it's important to reflect on the higher education field. And finally, it seems to be that it's really important to create an environment where there's an opportunity for all students to reduce barriers between the classroom and the outside. Sue was telling me earlier about a class that she runs, where, or used to run, where she would take people out and show them things. And it wasn't strictly the curriculum, but it was sufficiently close to it. And that seems to me to be really important. So some final thoughts about lifelong learning, radical pedagogy. I've learned an awful lot from my own background in Southern Africa in terms of thinking about different ways of engaging with students. The heart of it is that you start from a position of thinking that your students have things to bring to the classroom that you don't have. Now, many people in this room operate with that kind of premise. And the first technique that I've used quite a lot is participatory rapid appraisal, or where it comes from in the South, participatory rural appraisal. And this comes from a notion that people in their own community actually know about their community more than the researchers who are actually coming in. Now, this is a technique that you can use in classroom really, really well, because your students know their own backgrounds, they know their contexts, they know their communities, and they can help you help them learn. And I think it's a really good technique. It works in the same ways that it works in terms of participatory rapid appraisal, where you get the people from communities, or in this case your students, to tell you about their expert knowledge. And from that, you can then develop the kinds of interventions that will best suit that particular environment. The second example that I use here is something called research circles, which is something that they've used in Sweden for quite a long time. And I've used quite a lot in my teaching as well. And it's similar, really. This was an idea of working with trade unionists who were concerned about, actually were cleaners in a particular organisation. That's where it kind of started. They were concerned about some of the products that they were having to use to clean, because they were worried that it was actually going to affect their skin. So the university lecturers came in and actually worked with those group of cleaners to help them develop research skills. And again, it seems to me, yesterday I heard a fantastic presentation where actually what people were doing with the students was giving them control over what topics they could explore and discuss. And when they asked questions of saying, well, we don't know about that, the response from the teacher, quite rightly, is go and do the research. You are able to be active learners in this context. And the final example I have around radical pedagogy is a whole systems approach, or total place evaluations that are really quite current within the UK and the USA. And that is where you recognise that the learning is not hermetically sealed, it is in a context. So that you start by working with your students, thinking about, what do they want to achieve, where have they come from, what is the situation that they're in, what are the resources that we have. So you pull all of that together and you then turn that into a curriculum. Is this possible to do in a competence-based model? Yes, it is. You can still tick the boxes, but you can put around that a much more rounded, much better kind of curriculum, which develops people as whole people. So even if they are unable to do things after class, they've had an after-class experience in the classroom. Thank you very much.